So this is, remind me which House District this is.
30.
House District 30. Thanks for joining us. This is Willamette Week's endorsement interview for House District 30. We're eager to chat with you and get to know both of you. It's not a debate, but we will ask you to engage with each other. We also, because it's not a debate, we're not going to promise equal time. We'll ask questions that will help us to understand the two of you better and may concentrate on one person rather than another for a few minutes in order to get to know you a little bit more and to clarify who we're going to choose in this contest. So without further ado, if you could introduce yourselves to our audience of 14 people at home, and we'll start with you.
So my name is Nathan Sosa. I am the current state representative for House District 30, which covers basically Eastern Hillsborough and Helvetia. I was appointed back in February of this year, just before the short session. I've lived and worked in Hillsborough for many years. My wife and I live in the Orenco Station area, and my job is right there as well. And in addition to my day job as an attorney, I've also done a lot of volunteer work in the community. So I've been on the board of the Hillsborough Schools Foundation for the past 7 years, was president for 4. I'm an ambassador with the Washington County Chamber of Commerce. Served on the Hillsborough 2035 Community Oversight Committee. And I've done a lot of volunteer work related to homeless youth, parks, libraries. So public service is just who I am. And also spent 4 years on the Oregon Government Ethics Commission and chaired the commission in 2020.
Great, thank you. Same.
So I'm Joe Everton, running for House District 30 as well. My wife and I moved here in 2001. I was fresh out of college with a bachelor's in computer science. Came out for a tech job with a big tech company in Hillsborough.
Which one?
Intel. I've had a lot of interesting opportunities with that. I've come to really appreciate how much fun you can have with a STEM career here. We have some great opportunities. I've worked in factory automation. I've worked on game developer tools, an online card game, ground control systems for fixed wing drones. I mean, these are all just here in the metro area. So really different industries, different kinds of companies and sizes and everything. Great experience. And a couple years ago, I went back and got my master's in computer science with data science, just trying to get a boost for my career. And that was great. But really, this is all kind of secondary to my primary goals, which are really about family. We have 3 kids. Our oldest is 21 now. We've got also 14 and 13-year-old girls, and just helping them get the best opportunities that we can, partnering with schools, other community members, friends, neighbors, to try and help our community have great opportunities for our kids, so that they're ready for the future. Let's see. So this kind of interest in our kids kind of helped me get into this path where I was really involved with our schools. I was on the Curriculum Advisory Committee to advise our school board on curriculum choices. And some experiences that I had with my son as he graduated from high school a few years ago, just realizing, looking at the opportunities 7 years later for my daughters, it just occurred to me that some of the opportunities are kind of not as good. Some things have been kind of on the downhill. And wanting to help out with that, I ran for school board last year. Had a great campaign, worked with some fantastic people, met a lot of great people in Hillsborough, and just came to, I went in there thinking I'm going to help people with STEM, right? Help kids excited about it. But what the voters wanted to talk about was getting our schools back open, and so that's really what the campaign was about. So, and what I learned was, this has to do with the school board, but a lot of the things that I want to help with actually are being taken care of at the state level in the legislature. So that's why I'm running for state rep this year. One of the reasons, right? If there was anything else I wanted to say intro-wise.
Did you win the school board race?
49%.
So the other person got 51?
Less than 51, yeah.
It's tight.
It was 300 votes apart, yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. So there's a lot of passion about our schools. It was a very interesting race. I would say our race has been relatively quiet as for people jumping in and getting involved compared to the school board race last year. It was interesting.
Were people just very frustrated about the schools not being open?
I think there was just passion on both sides. There was kind of 4 conservatives on one side and 4 kind of more establishment union-backed teacher union types on the other side,
Mhm.
the establishment, and people were passionate about a lot of things. Yeah, but again, the biggest thing was getting our schools back open, because having them closed, there were parents who, as early as late 2020, realized they'd read that having our schools closed was hurting our most vulnerable students, and also that the classrooms weren't really a transmission area, right? And so there were a lot of parents who were really passionate about that.
Great. Representative Sosa, can you tell me a piece of legislation you introduced that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so I think one that I was very happy to co-sponsor in the short session this year was Senate Bill 1579. And what that did is it created an economic equity investment fund. It was $15 million that was going to be put into a fund that would be used to provide startup money for entrepreneurs that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So folks who maybe grew up in poverty, who had faced some sort of racial discrimination, maybe from a rural area. So it provided those funds for them, both to start a business or to expand a business. I thought that was an excellent idea, one that I was proud to co-sponsor.
Great. Can you point to a piece of legislation that he voted for or a vote he's taken that you disagree with?
I think I would point at the farm overtime bill.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand about that can hurt small farmers, and I think I would have tried to find a better balance, a little more consensus.
What's your response on the farm overtime bill?
Yeah, that was obviously the most contentious issue that we had in the short session. And I think the way that I went about deciding what to do on that one is sort of indicative of my approach to legislating. Is first thing I did was read the bill. I went to the advocates for it. I said, tell me why this is necessary. And I heard out the various issues they had pointed out related to the workforce in agriculture and all the struggles they were having, and how they lived shorter lifespans than everyone else. They were just very difficult working conditions, and that they were one of the few workforce groups that did not have the right to have overtime pay. So I heard them out. I said, okay. Then I went to farmers in my district, and I said, what is your perspective on this? And heard them out. They said, well, these are challenges that we face, and there are these peak seasons that we have, and so on. And then went back to the farmers and spoke to different folks. Attended actually a town hall about this, and just got more information, and just went back and forth talking to both sides and trying to figure out if we could find a solution that would work. Ultimately, the package that was passed on this provided a great deal of tax incentives and credits for the farmers to allow them to gradually transition over a period of several years to where they could allow sort of market forces to catch up. And what it did is it makes us actually on par with California and Washington, which offer farm worker overtime, and so it made us consistent with our West Coast neighbors, and also provided that tax relief for those farmers as they're making that transition. So I thought on balance, it was a good piece of legislation. That's why I voted for it.
Great. So your task here is to convince us that the incumbent, that your constituents would be better off with you rather than the incumbent. So why is that the case? How would you be an improvement?
I think Rep. Sosa's approach that he just took there, that he described, is not unlike something that I would try to do. I think what I bring is some more experience with our schools. And that's my main point of focus. There are a lot of other issues on voters' minds right now, and I will carry a balanced approach to a lot of those things, listening to both sides, and trying to find something that works for everybody. You know, the difference between a politician and a statesman is whether you represent just your people or the entire district, right? And that's, as I talk to voters on both sides right now, that's really what I'm thinking about, is how am I going to represent everybody, even the ones who disagree very strongly with me.
What would you like to see change in the schools?
How many minutes would you like me to take on?
Let's say 3.
Okay. I think if I had something to start with there. And the things that I've been thinking about are really around parental rights. I'll just refer back to some notes on that. So I would want parents and guardians to be considered the prime caretakers, right? They need to be involved in all the important decisions regarding their minor children. I would want parents and students to be allowed reasonable alternatives if the schools are failing to serve their kids. And those alternatives should not be cost prohibitive. They should be open to everybody. Parents must have access to curricula and program information so that they can know what their child is being taught, so that they can make informed decisions about whether the schools are working for their kids or not. And communities of parents should have meaningful control over the direction that their schools are heading with policies and curricula. And that should come through school board elections. That they should be meaningful. The school board should make meaningful decisions, and that means local control. I think that's most of it. I have some other ideas, but I mean that's kind of the Parent Bill of Rights that I'm thinking about. And some of those things have been tried, have come up in the legislature recently. So.
Do you have a copy of the Parents' Bill of Rights? Is it on your website or anywhere I can?
Not yet. I'm going to be updating my website this week.
Is there a piece of legislation you're looking forward to introducing in the next session?
Yes, I think the one that I'm most excited to introduce is a concept I've been working on over the past several months. And what it does, in essence, is it expands the work-study program to include nonprofits in the community. So most folks are familiar with the work-study program where you work on campus and you do some clerical job, and in exchange you get paid and you also get discounted tuition. One of the things that I've noticed is that our nonprofits in particular, like so many industries, are struggling to find workers, struggling to attract talent. And of course our students are struggling to have affordable higher education. So I thought, okay, wouldn't it be great if we could have at least a pilot program to start out, maybe at one or two of our public universities, where we expand work-study, not just for jobs on campus, which there are only a few of those, and there are certain restrictions on those. What if we were to expand that, and we were to allow the same type of program, but students can now work for nonprofits? So I think that accomplishes a number of things. One, the students are going to be able to actually work, hopefully, in a field for the nonprofit that is linked to their area of study, so that they will actually have something really good on their resume. They'll get some practical work experience and be able to network and make those connections. In addition, they'll also get discounted tuition, which means in theory they'll have to take out less in loans. And the nonprofits are going to then have a greater pool of applicants than they might otherwise have, and make that available to students who might never have thought of working for a nonprofit while they were in school. So I think that sort of accomplishes multiple goals at once, and that's the legislation I'm most excited to introduce.
Great. Could each of you give me an example of a place where you can demonstrate independence from your party? One of the things that we value in this newsroom is the ability to think for yourself and to not just simply be a party regular. Mm-hmm. So can you find a place where you disagree with your caucus with the Democratic Party on I realize that it's not monolithic, right?
Sure,
for either party. But if you can point me to a place where you disagree with your caucus or have stood up to your caucus or its funders.
Mm-hmm. I think one area is related to gain share. And that's the program where counties give certain tax breaks to corporations who relocate to the area in exchange for them creating a certain number of jobs. And of course the counties lose out on tax revenue they might otherwise get, but they've attracted businesses to the area.
Sure.
With the Gain Share program, the state agrees to pay back some of that lost revenue out of the economic activity that is generated by those businesses being there. Of course, I'm from Hillsborough, so we have Intel, we have Genentech, we have a lot of tech companies coming to the area, and Washington County has been very concentrated on attracting businesses there. And I believe that Washington County last time around got about $16 million out of the Gain Share program. I think it's per year or per biennium. And so that is an area that I think that we need to continue to do, to grow our economy, to attract businesses, and to ensure that our counties, in exchange for doing that, aren't going to suffer a significant loss of revenue that's going to cause them to have to cut services elsewhere. So that is, I think, a topic where perhaps some of my Democratic colleagues might not agree with that.
Sure.
But that is an area that I feel pretty strongly about, just based on where I'm from and the district that I represent, and something that I'm willing to fight for.
That makes perfect sense. How about yourself? A place where you and the GOP might break ways a little.
I'm still gonna need to know my caucus, and I'm trying to think where I would break there. Yeah, come back to me on that.
Sure. Lucas?
Can you talk, like, if you, because we're talking about schools, like, do you think that the school system is working well as it is right now, or what do you think the state can do?
Yeah, I think it starts with resources. Prior to the Student Success Act, there were 11 straight years of budget cuts to our schools. And the Student Success Act, when it was passed a couple of years ago, it did fill in about $1 billion a year that in additional revenue. But according to the quality education model, we're still about $600 million short where we should be to have a fully funded K-12 system. As I said earlier, I'm on the Hillsborough Schools Foundation, was president for 4 years, so we routinely were raising money from donors to fund innovative programs in the schools. What was shocking to me was how many of those grant requests that we got from teachers were for things that I think we all assume teachers already have. Just basic pieces of technology. Music teachers that need instruments. They have a class of 30 students, they only have 12 instruments. Or art teachers that have a class of 25 kids and they've only got art supplies for a handful of them. So I think that is indicative of a district that has been chronically underfunded for a long time. And I think that is true statewide. So my approach to education is we need to give our students and our teachers the tools and the resources to be successful. And then we need to hold them accountable for what they do with those funds. But I think first we need to begin by giving them the resources.
And so how would you do that? Would you take money from other places, or would you raise taxes, or what would be your strategy?
I think it's a question of priorities, right? And the state has money, and it's a question of what are we spending the money on? What is our first, second, and third priority on things like that? I think education needs to be one of our top priorities because I think it's the basis of almost everything else. It's the basis of our economic growth. We need to be preparing the students in K through 12 for the jobs that we have available when they graduate. We need to be creating career pathways. This is something I've done in the nonprofit world. We've put career exploration kits, or are putting career exploration kits in all the elementary school classrooms in our district. We've put career exploration labs in all of the middle schools. My opponent talked about STEM. We put STEM kits in every classroom in the district. And so these are things that I think we need to do on the state level. We need to be thinking very carefully about where are our resources going, and are the resources that we're spending on education actually going toward preparing the students for the jobs that we know are in existence or will be in existence in the near future. So I think it's a question of setting those priorities, providing the funding, and going from there.
Great.
Mr. Joe, you were talking about, school or parental choice. Like, can you be more specific on exactly, are we talking charter schools, or like what are some specific proposals you want to?
Yeah, everything that you've probably already heard of or thought of. I mean, homeschooling, private schools, charter schools, online charter schools, all these.
And you want to do that with public funds?
What's that?
Like, would you change the funding system that we have right now, or like how would you do this financially?
So there's something in play right now, a ballot measure that's going to be coming up later, not this time, but later, for school choice, where the tax dollars follow the student, and I think that could be a good thing. It could incentive good behavior. I mean, it could incentive putting the student first, no matter where they go. If the tax dollars follow them when they leave, right? So that's one way to do it. But I mean, I think that ballot initiative is going to be a constitutional amendment. So I mean, if that doesn't happen, then we could still make it possible for these options to be helped out financially, right? And I think that could be good. My kids personally have benefited from this. We've done an online charter school, and it's been really good for them. And this was after striving very hard with our schools to try and make something work. And just sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We've done some homeschooling, we've done all kinds of things. But I've worked with communities of parents and students and all kinds of these alternatives and gotten to know them, and I just see so many students who are benefiting from it. But I think there are a lot of students who, for whatever reason, they're not aware of the opportunity, or their parents can't afford it because they're both working or whatnot, right?
I want to get to both of your thoughts on an idea I keep hearing throughout this cycle, and it's not something we talk about at all here. This has not been a law and order conversation generally, but I keep hearing from candidates that they would like to repeal Measure 110. And I'm curious, how do you think Measure 110 is doing, and would you vote to repeal it?
Yeah, so in regard to Measure 110, the voters made a decision that throwing people into prison for possessing a small amount of illegal drugs had not worked. They began doing that in the 90s and it accelerated, and it didn't work. And the voters made that decision that this is not the way to go. Now, the problem that I see with the way things have played out is by decriminalizing that, we did not have the infrastructure in place to deal with the increase in addiction or mental health services. I'm on the Behavioral Health Committee, and so Oregon unfortunately ranks near the bottom when it comes to accessibility for addiction treatment and mental health services. Now, there has been significant investments that have been made in the 2021 session, and we made additional investments in the 2022 session to try to support county-based treatment programs. The problem is that those were on a multi-year rollout. And so in 2022, when I came into the legislature, there was understandably requests for some emergency funding to try to retain and recruit more workers, to try to speed up the deployment of these programs. So I think that is something that we need to continue to try to do, to accelerate that, and to ensure that people who are suffering from addiction get the help that they need.
Same question. Measure 110.
Measure 110? Yeah, it was a ballot measure. I personally voted against it. I was skeptical. And I think I have a lot of the same concerns that, we're putting the cart in front of the horse in terms of getting the order right. I understand, I've learned a bit about addiction, and I understand that the stigma is a concern, but at the same time, if we just pull away, what we have right now is a society that it's kind of holding things together, and then, it's kind of putting them from the jails into the street, right? So I would definitely want to fund, and this kind of goes to how I think about homelessness too, as a broad issue, is we can't just fix one part of it, right? There's a complex issue with lots of sub-issues contributing to it, and we need to address all or most of them, right? And then address them individually, case by case, person by person, not just throwing money at it, because we can't. I think part of the problem, I've run into some people while talking to voters who've counseled with some people in this situation, and a lot of them would not necessarily choose to leave the streets, and there's different reasons for that. There are so many different reasons why people are homeless, right? And I think, fixing a lot of the root causes, and then also setting up an expectation that this is not acceptable, right? I think that's what I'm hearing from a lot of people, is we need to come back to a place where it's like, that's just not an acceptable lifestyle. We want to help people get out of it and get get back on their feet.
This is an opportunity for each of you to ask each other a question, if you like. So I'll let you go first if you'd like to ask your opponent a question.
So what are the top 3 things that you want your kids to get out of our public school system?
I want them, I don't have any children yet.
Hypothetically, yeah,
Sure.
that's fine.
I would want them to get the skills that they need to be successful in the world. I want them to go to a school where they are accepted, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like. And I want them to be able to explore whatever their interests are, because we have funded the various programs that we all agree ought to be there, whether that's art, whether that's music, whether that's STEM, whatever it may be. I think that we need to make sure that all those options are available to our children going forward.
And the same opportunity to you.
Joe, if you're elected, will you stand by Oregon's law protecting the right of a woman to choose?
Let me answer that one, yeah. So I'm pro-life, and we have an interesting point here where the states are going to be deciding for themselves, and so this legislation, next legislative session could be really important that way, right? I am pro-life, but when I look at my constituents and the way I understand my state, there are a bunch of different outcomes that could come, right? And from the data that I've been reading, from the polling that I've been reading, a complete ban and absolutely no restrictions are actually pretty unpopular. But what I have read is that 70 to 80% of Oregonians would like reasonable restrictions on abortions, things like partial birth abortion, things that are really pushing the envelope. Because right now we have no restrictions; it's completely unrestricted, as I understand it. So, if we can get to a point where we're satisfying 70 to 80% by putting some restrictions on, I would call that good, and I can get behind that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
On an entirely different note, in every cycle we ask one fun question for the candidates in every race. It's the same question to everybody.
Okay.
And in this case it is, if the world were ending tomorrow, if you knew it was your last night, maybe the world isn't ending, maybe it's just your last night, who knows? But you have the chance to have one last food, one last dish, one last food item. I've had my favorite answer so far, and it happens to be one that I probably would agree with, is fresh corn on the cob with butter. Just one menu item that you would have as your last food. What would it be?
I'm going to go with a double fudge chocolate cake.
There we go.
There you are.
Yep.
I'll say, so there's a restaurant not far from where I live called Zap Thai, and they have something called pumpkin curry.
Nice.
And it's not just seasonal; they have it year round. But it's especially this time of year. If I had to choose, that would probably be it.
Pumpkin curry is also an excellent choice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you for your time. We really appreciate you joining us for this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.